वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गोविंद वृंदावन बिहारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, श्याम सुंदर मदन मोहन वृंदावन बिहारी, श्याम सुंदर मदन मोहन वृंदावन बिहारी, वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी, जय वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की जय, श्री सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय।
Hari Om everyone. Can you all see me and hear me clearly? Awesome. Today we will continue with our 24th discourse on the ātmabodha. We will be looking at the 47th and 48th shloka. Kids have also started joining the class. Okay. So we will start with our invocation and get in with the chanting. Our Hari is back, so he will chant and I'll repeat after him. सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Let me join Hari.
तपोभिक्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्ष्योऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते 47-48 सम्यग्विज्ञानवान् योगी
Samyagvijñānavān yogī
स्वात्मन्येवाखिलं जगत्
svātmanyevākhilaṃ jagat
एकं च सर्वमात्मानं
ekaṃ ca sarvamātmānam
ईक्षते ज्ञानचक्षुषा
ईक्षते jñānacakṣuṣā
आत्मैवेदं जगत्सर्वम्
ātmaivedaṃ jagatsarvam
आत्मनोऽन्यन्न विद्यते
ātmano'nyanna vidyate
मृदो यद्वद्घटादीनि
mṛdo yadvadghaṭādīni
स्वात्मानं सर्वमीक्षते
svātmānaṃ sarvamīkṣate. Thank you.
So this is verse 47, and here we start off with vidyate yogī ikṣate. So here, this is the contemplative one who has then become established as a yogi. What does he see? Ikṣate. Sorry, samyak has to go first. That's one who is always and totally established in that knowledge. What does that person see? And he sees with jñānacakṣuṣā, through the eyes of wisdom, svātmanyevākhilaṃ jagat, cha ekaṃ sarvamātmānam. And I will also go into 48 because the ideas are very similar in both, and it's worth looking at them together. So in 48, ātmaivedaṃ jagat sarvam. So this entire jagat is verily Atma itself. And ātmanaḥ anyat na vidyate. Other than Atma, there's nothing else. yadvadghaṭādīni. So the example or analogy that's given is just like the pot that comes from clay. Svātmānaṃ sarvamīkṣate. So that this person sees everything as one's own self. So again, these two verses are focusing on what is the vision of someone who has become realized. So it's worth looking at the root word of yogi. The root word is yuj, meaning to join or to yoke. And here Gurudev mentions that this is joining our mind and intellect to the higher state. Right now, our mind is constantly towards the OET. And so Gurudev says that when the mind goes outwards, we become a bhogi. But if our mind goes towards Om, it becomes a yogi. And what's important to remember is that this is the mental attitude. And it has nothing to do with the external expression of being a yogi. And the most hard-hitting example is given by Puja Adi śaṅkarācarya ji in Bhaja Govindam itself. This is verse 14, where he talks about Jatilo Mundi Lunchitakesha and so on. That we see that often people can go as far as, looking like a sannyasi with whether it's matted hair or shaven head or even, pulling the hairs out. They're wearing the ochre robes, but when they walk around, it is only for seeking for the belly's sake, right? So that example tells us that even as simple as just for food, the mind is still in the direction of OET. That does not make you a yogi, even though you look like it as best as you can. A yogi only comes from when the mind is yoked to the higher and has become well established. So from this perspective, they become samyagvijñānavān. That this contemplative student has totally and fully identified and realized that divine as their subjective experience. Again, we saw in the last couple of verses that this is not a recognition or understanding where you have the Tripurti, that I have me, myself, and the object as Atman, and through my senses or with my mind, with an instrument, I am recognizing Atman. No. You remove all differences, and this is a very subjective experience of identifying with Atman and Brahman. So once that has been established, you now have the vision of jñānacakṣuṣā, the jnanam, that state of knowledge. And so now how do you see jagat? So here, this is where it starts to get interesting, that the same idea is given twice between 47 and 48. The first one is svātmanyevākhilaṃ jagat, which is similar to 48, where we see ātmaivedaṃ jagatsarvam, meaning that everything is an expression of that Atman itself. In a short phrase, I would say all is in the one. And the second half, the contrary side to it, is ekaṃ sarvamātmānamīkṣate, or in the verse 48, ātmanaha anya na vidyate, that one is in all. So there's this kind of, if you had to have a quick phrase, all in one, one in all. So what does this mean? That when I look at the world, its very substratum is Atma itself. But Atma is not limited by Jagat itself. It is more than that, more than Jagat itself. So if we look at the word Jagat, that which needs to be held up. Yadvadghaṭādīni. So Jagat itself has no independent existence. It must be upheld by the reality of this substratum, which is Atman itself, which is why we can say that all aspects of Jagat is an expression of Atma itself. But on the very same hand, we can't say that Jagat is the only expression of Atma. Atma is not conditioned by any of the upadhis, that it is expressed in its own self. So in order to understand this, the Gurudev first explains it in terms of this dreamer and the waker. That when the dreamer has now awakened, and from the vision, the chakshu of the waking state, if you look back into the dream state, you realize that the dream is just an illusion and it had no independent existence other than the mind itself. But then an issue may come up that, okay, when I wake up, the world disappears, right? The dream world disappears, it no longer exists. Is that the same kind of experience? Does the jagat disappear altogether once I've become realized? The answer is no. And that's given by the example that's given as the clay and pot. So when we examine a pot, we know that it is made from clay, and it is clay alone. It's not made of something else. Just because it has that particular form, it has a certain function, and therefore we give it a name, right? So it could be really small and shallow and it becomes a cup. You can widen it to accommodate more food, so it becomes a plate. Or it can become, you know, a bowl, a vase, whatever it is, right? So it's just the shape that delivers a function, and therefore we give it a name. But does that form, function, and name have any independent existence of its own? No. It is the clay itself that is existing. And so we have to, when realization happens, it is that understanding that changes. That this is Atman itself that is expressing as Jagat. All that we see is forms, names, and functions, but the reality of what it actually is Atman itself. So that is all I'm able to see. So the experience is that there's nothing other than Atman itself. It is Atman alone. So from whichever perspective you want to think about it, whether Atman exists in every single object that we see, or that all exists in one, or one exists in all, is different perspective to recognize the pervasiveness and the only reality that Atman is. Everything else doesn't have its own independent reality. So that is all I have, Swamiji.
Hari Om. So these two shlokas come at a very important time now. Because when it comes to ideas, concepts that are understood, principles that are irrefutable, after we've logically ascertained them, and we are convinced that this is the truth, then we see these ideas in action. What's meant by that is, what are the implications of these principles then? And since Vedanta is that science of understanding what my true nature is, what are the implications of these siddhantas on myself? What did I consider myself to be? What do I consider myself to be now? All of that. So starting off here in the 47th shloka, we find that the subject is Vijñānavān, that yogi, that perfect yogi of realization. Now, when someone has Vijñāna, as opposed to just jnana, it's not just knowledge anymore, but it's wisdom. Not just indirect knowledge anymore, that there is this Brahman, there is this Atma, this is the substratum of everything. It's I am Brahman. I am that Atma. Irrefutably, that's that conviction. That is direct knowledge at that point. So naturally, whatever lakshanas of that Atma that we've studied, whatever I see as that Atma being, that understanding comes that is nothing but me, that one, that absolute, I can't be anything different from that. Unshakable conviction in that truth. Now, what's the product of that? What are the siddhantas? svātmanyevākhilaṃ jagat. That he sees the entire universe in his own self, and then ekaṃ sarvamātmānamīkṣate, sees everything as his own self. So this universe, and we say universe meaning that when we say the universe, we think of galaxies and everything that's out there, but really universe is anything that I perceive. Not so far of a reach to think that this entire universe, don't have to go that far, but what affects me the most, what I have that aham buddhi with, what I think is mine so much, that's what's in my vicinity. The people I interact with on a daily basis, those objects I use on a daily basis, those insecurities that plague me on an hourly basis, this is what's in my immediate vicinity. That is my jagat. Now, once this is understood, that he sees the entire universe as his own self and nothing different, one major obstacle that ajnanis we all have is fear. That fear goes away at that point when there is no other. Because fear is what spurs us to action. Fear is what makes us feel incapable of doing certain things. Fear is what keeps us in this limitation, thinking I am this limited being. Think about it. Fear is even used as a tool. Growing up, wouldn't people tell us, parents or teachers, that if you don't work hard, if you don't get a quality education, then you'll end up without many opportunities, you'll end up in a wrong path, therefore educate yourself. It wasn't always that reach for something great, reach for your dreams. There was also that dose of the fear of if you don't fulfill education a certain way, you'll end up a certain way. So fear was used as that tool as well. That fear can only happen if there is something I consider other than myself. From the most physical level of I'm walking into a dark alley and there's someone other than me in there, that's what scares me, or the monster under my bed. From that level of a child all the way till knowing the unknown, what's going to happen a few months from now, a few years from now, a decade from now with my loved ones, all of those insecurities setting in about the unknown, that creates that fear. But the moment that it's understood that everything going around is nothing different from me, it's not that the world is attacking me, things happening to me from the world. This is just an extension of myself. And all these changes that I see happening around, honestly, with my identity, my true identity, I have nothing to do with all of that. Now, to say that is very easy to do. For me to sit there and smiling and say that is very easy. To actually understand this and act accordingly is a very difficult to do. That's the very biggest sadhana. And what is that thing that differentiates that person who has this conviction from me right now? Is that person is jñānacakṣuṣā. Jñānacakṣuṣā, third case of through that eye of wisdom, that's how they come to this conclusion. And elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita, jñānacakṣuṣā comes in the 15th chapter. And there, Bhagavan Bhashikara explains it as that eye of wisdom means that which has been opened by an authoritative source of knowledge. And that's only the Vedas. Where we saw in the very beginning of Sadhana Panchakam, our last text, Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam. That study the Vedas daily, that's where this knowledge comes from, no other place. That I cannot call myself jñānacakṣuṣā unless the place that I found this knowledge comes from that Vedas. That these are the conclusions found there. No other kind of conclusion that's not supported by the Shastra Pramana has no bearing on what my identity is. That's one part of jñānacakṣuṣā. Other part is, how do they see? They have the power of discrimination, viveka, that discretion to see what is real and what is unreal. Therefore, they come to the conclusions that they come to, supported by the Vedas. With that viveka. And that goes back to our basic texts of ātmabodha that we've seen as well, where in the sadhana chaturashtaya, the first requirement given is that viveka, that capability of apprehending what is real versus what is unreal. That's that eye of wisdom. Now, when we come to the second shloka here, it expands on the ideas given in the previous shloka. ātmaivedaṃ jagatsarvam. Atma is this universe. If we look at Ishavasya Upanishad, the very first mantra is saying something very similar to this, that this entire creation, anything that is simply that self. Then ātmanaṃ anyat na vidyate. Nothing exists other than that Atman. Because we could make that logical misstep of saying, okay, Atma is everything, it's this universe. So there's this Atma underlying everything, and then there's everything existing on top of that, everything that I perceive. But that second clause in the statement here, ātmanaṃ anyat na vidyate, tells me what existence really is, what is sat. And again, we've seen that in ātmabodha. Kālatraya api tishtati iti sat. That which is present in all periods of time, that there is no time when it was not, it's present now. There is no time when it will not be, only that can be considered sat. And if I look in the world of everything I perceive, looking for something that is present in all periods of time, I don't find anything. Shastra is what tells me Atma is that only thing that is present in all periods of time. Now, when we move further in the shloka, then, svātmānaṃ sarvamīkṣate. All that is perceived is the self. That is the statement that's made. But then we can have an objection here. If I'm saying all that is perceived is the self, then I can say, okay, what do I perceive? What I perceive is all I can see with these five senses: sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. That's it. Can I perceive Atma with any of these five senses? I can't. That which has no lakshana, what am I going to use to even grab on and say, okay, this is Atma because I ascertained this? It's not possible. So Atma is not perceived through these five senses. So what is meant here is, despite me perceiving everything, understanding that it only arises from that Atma, therefore the only existent thing is that Atma, therefore any reality I give to all of these fleeting things, that's untenable. I can't do it. Now, the thought that we have in our head is never, this is real to me. Like this person is real to me. This thing is real to me. I never verbalize it that way. But when I have any kind of agitation about, say, health of mine or someone else's, when I have great agitation at losing one object that I have, something in my possession that I thought was mine, when I have great agitation when one piece of advice that I've given someone or some intellectual clarity that I have, when that's been rejected, that kind of agitation, all of this is me giving reality to the world around me. Which is why in our Shastras, it's not that we go object by object, negating this as unreal. There are some logical ways we do that, but as we saw previously in our study in this group, we see a process like Panchakosha Viveka, where the layers that are most immediate to me, the ones that affect me the most, I go in layer by layer, understanding why it's false and unreal, and rejecting them as a part of my identity. And that's a slow process that's done with great deliberation. Now, the example that's given here is also very important. As always, especially in this text, Bhagavan Bhashyakara gives the most apt, precise examples to prove each of the points that are made. mṛdo ghaṭādīni. Pots and jars that are made of clay are actually nothing but clay. They have no real existence of their own. And so one other part of this example is, even when we say that this Atma gave rise to everything that we do perceive, that's only relative to me saying that there is a jagat out there. If I say that all of these things sprung from Atma, I'm saying that because I see all of these things, therefore it must have some kind of source. But when this has no reality at all, even that Atma has not birthed anything from it. If you look at what existence is. And the way we look at that in this example is, let's consider clay to be the cause and a clay jar to be the effect, for instance. Okay, we say that this jar is the effect. We gave it a name because it has some peculiar shape to it. We have some utility value in it, so we say this is a jar. We really think about it though, what is that jar made of? Only clay. Therefore, it's something different from that clay. Therefore, it's not really an effect. Now you go back to the clay. We've called it a cause, but we found that it has no effect. If something has no effect, you can't really call it a cause. Someone only becomes a father when they have a child. No one's born saying, yeah, my name is dad. No one has that. Once they become a father, they get that title. Therefore, this clay being the cause, that's not even valid at that point. So there is no cause and effect, and there is no plurality looking from that highest standpoint then. And so the person understanding this, the yogi who understands this with that direct knowledge, using that jñānacakṣuṣā, that eye of wisdom, possessed of discrimination from an authoritative source of knowledge, shastra pramana, these are the conclusions that they come to. And because of that, they're abhaya. Fear is no longer a factor in their lives. They understand what to give reality to, and therefore they see their true nature, and happenings in the world have no sway over that nishtha of what their true identity is. That's what these two shlokas say. That's all I have, Swami.
Thank you both. Thank you, Hari. Thank you, Divya. Can you all hear me clearly? Awesome. Now let's dive into these two shlokas. Before we get into these two shlokas, in the last few shlokas, there is one thing that has been firmly ascertained. What is jnana? Jnana is that where there is no samshaya or viparyaya. Technical words, what it means, there are no doubts and there is no habitual error. How does one remove samshaya? Shravanam. As soon as Shravanam is done, then mananam kuryat. When one engages oneself into manana, that manana essentially has to remove all the doubts that are there in our understanding. But then we see that in understanding and assimilating that knowledge, though one may realize one's own true nature, as soon as the doubts are removed and that understanding dawns upon the seeker, yet habitually we get drawn to various attitudes that which we are set in. We are set in, the mind equipment is set in. Why? Aneka janma samprapta. How does one remove that habitual erroneous errors that keep happening, which draw us back into the tadatmyata into that oneness with the body, mind and intellect equipment, that can be broken through thorough contemplation. So if that is pulling us down, the habitual errors, to cancel that is this nididhyasana. This is what we call meditation. The purpose of meditation is not to sit in, is not to realize. The purpose of it is to remove these samskaras that are there for several lifetimes that we have lived. That is the key purpose, nothing else. Then how does this atmajnana happen? Jnanat evatu kaivalyam. Through the jnana, how does that jnana happen? Shravana manana. With that manana, as soon as the clouds of confusion and doubts are removed, that which is my real nature, that which is my true nature, that which is one without a second, it reveals forth. So these are the two important steps. So what is jnana? Samshaya viparyaya rahita eva jnana. That alone can be called as jnana. If this is not there, can one realize according to what we define as realization? No. So there are confusions that, if I follow some other method, some other technique, some other invocation process, will such individual have jnana? Will such person realize? No, it is not a possibility. This is the only method to realize, as what we have defined, to abide in one's own true nature, one without a second. Advitiyam Brahma Padartham Aham Asmi Iti. That is called realization. In our colloquial language, we say, oh, I just realized. Do we mean that that realization is with regards to this Brahma Padartha? No, nowhere close to it. Is it not? Oh, I realized I left the stove on before I sat for the class, so I had to quickly run, shut it out and come. So that realization is different. It is nowhere close to what we are discussing. So there can be different kinds of realization, but when we use this word in our Shastra, realization means knowing this one without a second as my true nature. Now, how is this experienced? Because it is so subtle and most of us have not experienced. It takes preciseness to understand it. It is not andaz cutting, perfect fitting, sab chalta hai. This realization, tattva jnana, is explained in these two shlokas, 47th and 48th. Samyagvijñānavān yogī. Who is a yogi? Here we are not talking about the one that twists the body. Yes, when we are talking about the Yoga Shastra, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, then that definition will suit there better. But here when we say yogi, that who is one with their own true nature. Vijñānavān, there is this aparoksha anubhuti that is experienced. Aparoksha, immediate, subjective experience. Both words have to be used. Immediate, subjective experience. Such vishesha jnana. Vishesha Jnana makes it Vijnana. Visishta Jnana, that which clearly shows, like Hasta Amalakavat, that also we have seen last week. Like how clearly I can see. And it is immediate, Anjasa. It is not that you do now and then later it dawns upon me. It is immediate. As soon as I understand this, realization happens. That one who is established in this oneness is called a yogi. Why? Because of this vijnana, the subjective immediate experience. Samyagvijñānavān yogi. What is this experience like? Can it be put in words? svātmanyevākhilaṃ jagat. They see the entire world in their own self. Svātmani. Now, this svātmanyevākhilaṃ jagat further gets defined in the 48th shloka, where ātmaivedaṃ jagatsarvam ātmanaḥ anyat na vidyate. Because the confusion arises because when we start Vedanta Vichara, we are told that this Jagat is Jadam, Jagat is limited, Jagat is Panchamahabhutakrita. Therefore, one has to detach from it. Now, why is that being said? Are they changing their standpoint? जब मन में जो चाहा तब बोल दिया जगत के बारे में. When whatever is convenient, they redefine it and keep changing the rules of the game. And no, it is because our perspective at this point is that we are attached to the world of things and beings. When I am using a cup or a pot, my perspective is not from the perspective of it being clay. To understand that it is clay, I don't need to break the forms. Having understood that it is only clay, suddenly the potness doesn't disappear, the clayness alone is experienced, but in the form of that cup or saucer or the pot. The moment I understand that the waves are nothing but water, suddenly does the ocean stop the waves? No. Though I see the waves, though I see the pot, I see it from a different chakshu, different vision of understanding. This is called jñānacakṣuṣā. I am not seeing it from its vikara. And what is the vikara? Vācārambhanam vikaro namadheyam. That which I use at a utilitarian level with the name and form, that name and form and the attachment to it is called vikara. Now, for that vikara to drop, I have to understand the essence of it, not break it. Somebody after Vedanta class started breaking the pot. Why? I have to understand the clay. No, that is called murkhata. We don't need to break it. I have to understand the essence of it, evaluate and understand the essence of it. So here, ekaṃ sarvamātmānamīkṣate jñānacakṣuṣā. This is called the vision of jnana. That I do not see the vikara, but I see the substratum as my own self. I go back to the favorite, usually in the Yuva Kendra I use this. In the Matrix movie, as soon as he realizes, he sees that the forms and names are meaningless, the substratum, the coding is understood. And then, can he do miracles? No, it is not a miracle. Just understanding that that which is just the name and form will not have an impact on me. This understanding is to function with this jñānacakṣuṣā. सृष्टि वही, देखने की दृष्टि बदल जाती है. And what is the drishti? That everything is nothing but my own self in different expressions. It's only me. When I say different expressions, it can lead to a misunderstanding that the expressions are. Now, if we are stuck with the snake and rope, we can get confused, because once you see the rope, there is no snake. So therefore, another example can be used is Akasha Neelavat. The Neelatvam, the blueness of the Akasha, is only in my perception, but it is not there. Having understood it clearly, because I have understood it, does the Akasha suddenly change? No. Though I still perceive it as blue, my understanding is that it is only an appearance. Right? I know that it is the earth that is moving around the sun, not the other way around. Sun is not moving around the earth. We, the earth, are moving around the sun. But then Vyavaharika, we have the interaction knowing very well that the sun doesn't rise, doesn't set, but it is Vyavaharikata. We have accepted usages. There is a sunrise, there is a sunset. And there are some who are quite caught up in the sunrise and sunset. They will click it, post it, unfailing brightness of my life. You know who. Sunrise hashtag, sunset hashtag. Though we use Vyavaharika, sunrise and sunset, the knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding is very clear. There is no sunrise, there is no sunset. It is a pattern that I observe and it is accommodated, but with the understanding that it is earth that is going around, so it is only an appearance. The key word is appearance. That everything that which I am seeing, it is only a appearance. There is no more value added to that appearance. Presently, what is our perception is that there is name, form and various other tags added to it. A value added to it. All that value is deleted. Instead, I see it as only an appearance. That is the jñānacakṣuṣā. If I see it only as appearance, that means I am not attached to it. Therefore, thereby, it does not create an impact on me. I am not disturbed. I am not agitated. I am not carried away by it. Now, with this wisdom, when I interact with the world outside, which is just an appearance, there is abhayatva. Abhayatva, a sense of security, sense of nischalata. That cannot disturb me here inside. Because it is only an appearance. Now, supposing there is this Halloween mask that somebody has worn, and you purchased it for your own child, and that fellow is hiding behind the curtain. You can see his feet, right? But you act along. You wait for that kid to come outside. Boo! And when that boo, oh my God, is it you? Where were you? And you see the joy in that fellow's face that, Mama, I got you. Mama is Vijñānavān, jñānacakṣuṣā. She is a yogi. She understands. But then to play along, knowing that it is only appearance. Now, not knowing that it is an appearance, somebody was hiding, you did not know, and you were sitting and suddenly comes out with that kind of a mask, it will scare the living daylights out of us. That is the impact of not knowing it as an appearance. That is where we presently are. But for a yogi, ātmaivedaṃ jagatsarvam ātmanaḥ anyat na vidyate. There is nothing other than this Atma Chaitanya ever. The same Atma Chaitanya is dancing around in different names and forms, and those names and forms are only appearance. Just like when you see your own hand, there are fingers dancing. I don't know, there was something dancing there, No, it is my own extension. Why would I be as afraid of it? Sometimes what happens is the child sleeps on one side, the hand becomes numb, turns somewhere in the middle of the night, this hand falls on their chest, and because it has become numb, it feels cold, it feels like somebody is choking, and just that fear factor that somebody else is there choking me, it gets up all. The moment you understand that it is, you try explaining it to that child. The child is like, no, there was somebody, there was something on me. That is where we are today. We see the otherness, we get scared. Dvayat bhayam bhavati. Ekatve sati, when that is understood as one without a second, nirbhayam bhavet. It's me alone. So here continuing he says, mṛdo yadvadghaṭādīni svātmānaṃ sarvamīkṣate. I perceive the entire creation as like how all the clay pots and different forms that I have seen are nothing but. In the commentary on this, Padmapada ji says that ghatashārādivat mṛtkaryam mṛdah anyat na asti. Whether you take a pot or a saucer or a cup or whatever be the size, shape and utility, whatever be the name of it, what is the essence of it? Mṛda. Mṛda meaning, mṛt meaning it is the clay. Anyat, anything other than it, kuch bhi nahi hai. There is nothing other than it. We are caught up in all these names and forms. We see everything as separate and otherness. Whereas the jnani, the vijñānavān, the yogi, when they see it with that vision of jñānacakṣuṣā, what do they see? They see only that Atma Chaitanya. Therefore, The question is for the brahmacharyans. Yasmin sarvani bhutani ātmaiva bhutvijanatah tatra ko mohaha kashokaha ekatvam anupashyatah. Where is the reference from? Tick, tick, tock, tock. It comes from Ishavasya Upanishad. Yasmin sarvani bhutani ātmaiva bhutvijanatah. All of these names and form finally culminate only into me. Other than me, there is no other reality. So when people ask, Swamiji, why did God create all this? At this point, that question becomes nullified. Why does it become nullified? It becomes nullified because other than me, I realize there is no other truth to it. It's only me. Knowing this, what happens? What is the result? Tatra ko mohaha kashokaha. In such individual, where can there be moha and shoka? Moha meaning where is delusion, and where is the result of that delusion? In whatever different way, it creates misery in me. Shoka. Agitation, frustration, anger, various formats. Tatra ko mohaha kashokaha. Why? Ekatvam anupashyataha. There is only oneness perceived. Now for this wisdom to be experienced, practical tips. This is tattva vichara. How is this tattva vichara put into practice? I still have 10 minutes, so let me cover that aspect of it. Shravana manana nididhyasana, what do they do? Shravana manana nididhyasana, Shravana brings forth that knowledge, viveka, and the knowledge is clearly understood. But there are samshaya meaning doubts, and those doubts and confusions are removed only through manana. There are viparyaya, are the habitual erroneous perceptions, habits, samskaras. Those are removed through nididhyasana. So Shravana manana nididhyasana has to be the clear-cut sadhana. The mind should be available for that Shravana manana nididhyasana, isn't it? If somebody has, say, called me a donkey, Ghada, Katte, Gadida. Poor Gadida might also feel bad. Why am I being compared to this fellow? But inside, agitated. The stability of mind, if it is not there, it is not available. When it is not available, it cannot be applied to Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. Therefore, Upasana must be consistently made as a habit. Upasana, puja, japa, dhyana of that Ishtadaiva, so that there is a shanti that pervades into our antakarana. Ashantasya kuta sukham. Where can there be a visualization of sukha without shanti? So, along with Shravana Manana Nididhyasana, puja, japa, dhyana of that Ishtadaiva as a regular practice has to be there. Such one who is now endowed with this shanti also needs to develop viveka, vairagya, shamadamadi, shat sampatti, and mumukshutva. Such one, when they sit in front of the teacher, absorb all that which is spoken, as Shravana, then churn within as Manana, then contemplate intensely. Sit down, close your eyes, that if this is the layer of habitual errors that are the samskaras which are disturbing me, prioritize it and find from the Shastra Vichara as to what is it that cancels this samskara. Identify that and supplement it here so that these patterns are cancelled. That is when the knowledge of this tattva, tattva-jnana, is a possibility. Then there are two more steps which we will see later. Later shlokas cover that, we will see that. But this is the practicality of it. Therefore, there is an insistence that right at a very young age, introduce them to japa, sandhya vandana, a little bit of yoga abhyasa, so that by the time they are qualified to sit at the feet of the master, at the feet of the guru, to learn this tattva jnana, the mind is available. The mind is available, the mind is quietened, the mind is sharp, the mind is balanced. It is not like lopsided. Now, such an available mind can easily recognize its patterns, work on those doubts, clarify it, and then come to be able to close its eyes without having a FOMO कि दुनिया में क्या हो रहा है. Oh my God, I just closed my eyes. I don't know what is happening outside. What is happening to the stock? What is happening? भाड़ में जाए. There is no distraction. Such an undistracted mind, when over a period removes these erroneous habits, removes these doubts, as soon as that doubt is removed, when will this happen? चाबी आपके हाथ में है. When you put the effort to remove those doubts and viparya. The moment that cloud is removed, that which is the self reveals. Now, how or when? How is explained? When is in your hands. Is the mapping clear? Because when the map is clear, we know what we are studying and it is here. It is at this point, this is applied. There is a clarity. So I think with that, I'll stop. We'll continue with the next shloka, next set of shlokas next week. Om Shanta Shanta Shantihi Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Take care everyone. See you in the next satsanga.